Pioneer Park on Mercer Island.
I'll second the comment about needing to measure and track social impact. Because most of the discussion, much of the discussion is about the social benefit to all people of South Seattle, but we don't have many ways of tracking that. We have clear ways of looking at concrete data regarding conversion and so forth. But I start to think of the need for some survey data, for instance. Could we see a measurable effect on involvement with the Major Taylor project before and after the building of the bike trail? We can ask a similar question of bike works. How much involvement do they see? How much increased opportunity? We could survey. Yes.
Bike works, but did you mention another organization?
The Major Taylor project.
Major Taylor?
Major Taylor project. At Ewing Institute for that.
Okay.
So, organization formed by Ed, Ron Sims, and a few others to get disadvantaged youth on bicycles. Very successful. So anyway, interested in our being able to get some survey or polling data to see how many people are involved with the new park and what ways. A friend of mine once said about this, young people need an opportunity to do stupid things. And I love the idea of having pedestrian trails in this park. We need that. I'll use those trails to contemplate the beauty of this forest. But a lot of people, especially youth, don't do that very much. But if they have an opportunity to experience the forest in an exhilarating way, they'll be there. And these bike trails are a way to bring those people in. They'll get exercise, the wholesome outlet for activity, it's an opportunity for parent-child interaction, and it'll perhaps introduce those young people to the benefits of volunteering and improving the forest that they're enjoying. So I think it's the way to that. We can't completely dodge negative impact from having, for instance, those cross trails, skill sections. We can mitigate, I think, considerably, and I think that it may be that the negative impact is negligible. But we need those trails to bring the people into the forest that are going to volunteer. Without those many volunteer hours, we'll never get rid of that ivy and the blackberry and the holly and so forth.
So with the idea being that people who are there using it,
Yes.
pedestrian or bikes, will be more inclined to then come in and,
Volunteer to maintain this forest.
so use leads to volunteering, sort of.
So I just wanted to see if we could clarify, are we supposed to be considering just the loop, or are we also considering the cross trails as well? Just to clarify.
I think how we articulated his name was options.
I really feel this is the key to this meeting, and we really need an answer to it before we can talk.
There are different expectations.
I'm also kind of trying to understand, we had a presentation, Maggie gave us for, I believe, 19 acres. She outlined in a drawing. Is that correct? And maybe that's a good example of, I'd like to try to understand what the scope of our project is, where the boundaries are. And typically in an environmental review work, you're provided with alternatives. And if there's something like field trails, are we to consider options for alternative sites?
Look, I was at the city council meeting. You're not talking about cross trails, okay?
Sorry, you can't interrupt here.
Well, I'm leaving. And you guys have declared
15
war.
minutes. We have 15 minutes at the end of the public.
Why just?
Keep going, Gerald.
Yeah, I can see, I think he's reflecting some of my concerns, if I read the project overview, the very first paragraph, it refers to the project, and goes on to say, the trail. It's not trails, plural. So, somebody help me here.
Let me reiterate the council direction that we received for the Department of Neighborhood Planning. And that contemplates a pedestrian perimeter trail for the Department of Neighborhood grant $100,000. I received direction to put out for your consideration other options that have been proposed by this project for your consideration to take a look at. But the direction from council in this particularly section 5 speaks to a perimeter loop trail. And so the entire project, if we were to talk about a phase 2 and a phase 3, would include cross trails. And I think it would be the job of this group that if they want to recommend to council something different than the council direction, that they can make that recommendation to up the chain. But ultimately, the council will be making that decision as to whether to accept the recommendation or not.
Can I ask a follow-up question then?
Yes.
So our task is, just for clarity, because I appreciate. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so for clarity, because I'm very confused at this point. With Mr. Superintendent about, okay, so I'm very confused, and I really need clarity. Sorry, I teach middle school. But from what's in front of me from the city council, what I remember and the notes that I took when Christopher was here, it's a multi-use perimeter trail. But now we're entering into a phase 2 and phase 3. So are we looking at all of this?
So what we're, excuse me, this microphone. So what we're looking at is the baseline project is a preliminary loop trail. That's what we have. That's what the Department of Neighborhood has granted funding for. I've been tasked to bring to this pad beyond the perimeter loop trail option that this pad can deliberate. And if this pad decides that they want to propose that they go beyond the perimeter loop trail, that they have the option of doing that, the tax collectively. And that then goes to a public process and then goes to the city council. The city council's direction through section 5 indicates funding for just a perimeter loop trail. So that is the baseline, that's the phase 1 project that really is in play. The additional phase 2 and phase 3, there hasn't been any funding identified for that. But I think as a whole project, I've been tasked to bring to your consideration phase 2 and what would be a phase 2 and phase 3.
And I'd like to respond to Daryl, because you're right. Typically in this kind of a process, you look at some design alternatives, and we just aren't at that phase yet. So that's what, Maggie will be working with us on. So, and from what I understand, from what you're saying, that one of those alternatives could be some of these cross trails for Laura first, and then Tom.
Let me just clarify, I'm prepared to work with this group in deciding not to have cross trails. You know, if that's the evaluation we make, and that looks like what's best. I just was my understanding that that it hasn't been taken off the table. I appreciate the clarification.
This conversation led me someplace else, so I wanted to raise that. I don't know if it's a concern or not, but I love the idea of kids on bikes. And so if we could pursue, maybe later in the project, any discussions about if there aren't skills areas in Cheasty Green Space, if that isn't a good use of the space, which I don't believe it is, are there alternatives as close as the Chief Self Trail where those kind of activities could be explored and those opportunities provided, and it wouldn't break up a natural area? So I'd like to keep that kind of a notion on the table, because I can really get behind some of that stuff.
Curtis, did we hear from you yet? Or that anybody who hasn't had a chance yet?
No, one thing that I'd like us all to keep in mind, I think there's a natural inclination when you're looking at an area that is currently degraded habitat, invasives, lots of digging is going on, is to look at that and then look at a proposal and look at the proposal as being so much better than the existing condition. It's a little more complicated than that, however. With all this restoration work, when we look at habitat quality, we really ought to be looking at the future and potential habitat quality, as well as the existing. I mean, there may not be threatened and endangered species in there now, but that's not saying that with all the restoration work that's going to happen, that there couldn't be. So, just keep that in mind.
So is there a particular way that you would form an evaluation criteria or something that would be looked at in terms of the environmental baseline to get there? Or
No, I don't have that expertise. That would be, something through the process, wildlife biologist type analysis, through the monitoring.
I can kind of speak to that a little bit too, having done a lot of environmental reviews. The first way that you typically look at things is you examine the status quo, which we can all acknowledge is a very degraded, pretty inaccessible forest area. And then you can say, all right, look, our levels of improvement. And so you can kind of make a few different goals and ranges within that.
any other thoughts? And then I'm going to ask you guys all another question. Go ahead, Phil.
I just wanted to add to the benefits that, I guess maybe it's one of the obvious ones, but there's a lot of schools in the area that may benefit from opening up the park. So that's a positive thing. I think about buses though, and I'm just curious if you can put in parking, if there's parking available, if it's a historic site. So I don't really know, what the capacity is for this area to handle additional cars, or even what the capacity is for bikes themselves. We've thought about that. And if there's been a baseline assessment of the wildlife that's currently there, it might be useful.
Dave Bennett.
Jack and Dave, thanks.
Okay.
I guess my two questions I need to know. I'm not quite sure if we agree on a common language for what green space is. I don't know, is that, it's a national park, has a lot of development. A wilderness area does not. I'm not sure where the green space in an urban environment, where that sits. And number two,
So do you mean?
I'm not sure how green space is being used. I think everyone, I don't know if there's a common, if we come to agreement how we use the word green space. I think everyone has their own
So kind of, it's more like,
interpretation of green
what's the
space.
definition, what's a green space versus something else?
Right,
Green space versus
I mean,
a park versus a.
yeah.
something. Okay.
And my second issue, getting back to the single trail, the perimeter trail versus some of these cross trails. I know that there's a grant for $100,000 for the perimeter trail, but I was looking at a project overview, the second bullet point just said the entire project would cost $450,000, $100,000 from the Department of Neighborhoods, and Friends of Cheasty Green would cover the rest. So I'm wondering if that money is covered through various grants with these cross trails and then other skill areas still go through.
When you mentioned buses, parking, I know parking has been a big issue. Over here. Did you mean like school buses with kids coming on, like field trip kind of thing, is that? Yeah. Okay, oh, sorry, all right, okay, and do we have the capacity for that, all right, okay. Ellie?
Something mentioned earlier that I want to just make sure is recorded in these notes is the idea of precedence. I think, because this is a pilot project and it is new for our city to consider it, we need to have that acknowledged as having other implications for other areas. I also want to highlight thinking.
Benefit or
I put it under. Guess it depends on your perspective.
Right. Because part of it would be how you, that evaluation monitoring component makes so much, is so important, because before you applied it anywhere else, you would want to know performance. Is that what you're?
Yeah. I also think we do, I kind of want to point out that we do need more measurements for how this might lead to long-term care as kind of a strategic element within this. Measurements for environmental justice as well, which can include kind of things like accessibility.
I would like a little bit of maybe discussion or input as to the term keeps being used as the degradation of the green space. And there are areas where we're potentially looking at where it is a healthy forest. The pictures that were shown are just around this area. And if you go north, the interior is still very healthy, but the perimeter is not because it's in the street. So I would just like that to be on record and to be acknowledged as well. So as we're looking at these measures and discussing, because we didn't go on that walk, we just went on a walk in the restored area. I believe in restoring all of Cheasty, and I want us to also keep in mind that it goes all the way to McClellan. So to think of this as well, how does this all connect together and give an overall feeling for that whole green space or natural area? Which I've always had the understanding from the Parks Department, those terms have been used interchangeably, and there is a definition in the park documents that would be nice to have. And including the children from Kimball, there's Muir, which is across the street, Franklin, Cleveland. I mean, there really is such a rich corridor of all ages of kids. Preschool is there at